Started here. Recording. So we've been going over the last chapter of Masterclass, Mark Olsen's and Mochi's book, and this is a Mark Olsen chapter. And it's his system for basic cube system. I'll go over a review because it's been August. We've had very few people the last couple of times. So I'll go over it again briefly, and then we'll go over, we're now into the quiz section. So that the book always has 15 quiz problems at the end of each chapter. So we'll do probably 3 more sessions on going over the quizzes. And
waiting for you to turn a light.
I'm also going, Stuart, did you?
I'll mute.
Okay. So I also introduced during the Chris Bray sessions, something actually that wasn't in the Chris Bray book, but it was a position, race, and threat system developed by David Presser. And so I'd like to take a look at both. We'll look at some positions today. We'll analyze it from both perspectives. Position, race, and threat system from David Presser is more, I'd say, more developed, at least in terms of what I know of it. I know Mark Olsen only wrote a chapter on basic cubes, so there's a whole lot more that we could say about it. But they're very similar. They're both based on position, race, and threats, but from a different perspective. So let's get into some of the problems, and we'll talk about them. So the basics for the Olsen point system. Well, first of all, I should say they apply to certain cases and not others. Olsen calls it the undefined positions. And defined positions are things like midpoint holding games, the end game where there's no contact, or racing games. And similar to the Presser system, when you have a strong prime, things are a little bit different. And so he also calls this priming is special. So you have to sort of recognize when the prime is the overwhelming characteristic and treat it accordingly. So the basic of the system is, in order to double, you must have threats. And Mark also goes into big detail about what kind of threats there are and that sort of thing. And those are, I think those are always the trickiest things, to figure out what the threats are, and are they significant? Are they market losers? Market loser being if you follow through on the threat with a good roll, is your opponent forced to drop if you double. And the idea here is that you want to double before you come up with the market losers, because you'd like to take 2 points instead of 1. And if you get a gammon, you'd like to take 4 instead of 2. So you must have threats. The second part of a system is you must have a significant advantage in 2 out of the 3 offensive game plans. And the game plans are racing, which is just pip count essentially, priming, or blitzing. And you can get partial or half points if you have some advantage, but it's not overwhelming. Now, in order to take a cube, you have to have an advantage in one of the game plans. And there's an extra game plan for defensive side, and that's contact. And contact essentially means having an anchor. And so that's the take. Now, compared to that, let me reintroduce briefly the Pratt system, the David Presser Pratt system, in which we're going to evaluate, again, it's position, race, and threat, but we're going to do it in a different way. We're going to evaluate position by assigning points to the inner board points that we made. We're going to assume you always have the 6 point. And that's our board versus our opponent's board. It's comparative, similar to what Mark Olsen would do. Race, and this is basically the same idea. Race, essentially, David Presser used 16-pip lead to be the race, as that would give you a full one for this. And Mark Olsen has something similar. I think he defined it more in terms of, well, if this were a straight race, what would you need to be for your opponent to drop to get a 1? But it comes out to be, early on in these sorts of situations, 16 or thereabouts is pretty close to 1. And then threats, Similar to the other to Mark Olsen system, it's threats, but you have to, and this is the tricky part, is what's a threat, how big is it, and that sort of thing. And those are harder to decipher, or trickier anyway. The one thing that is added into this system is gamma potential. Usually you're going to grade it from 0 to 0.5. So if you're gammonish, the more gammonish you are, the stronger value you have. And so we'll look at that. And that's also something that's fairly tricky, although the range is a little bit smaller. And by practicing these things, you'll get a good sense of it. Similar to the Olsen system, you do have to practice it. And if you remember from the first chapter, Mochi's section on really opening rolls and splitting or not splitting, where he analyzed racing and priming and blitzing positions, there's often not much of a difference between those, but you sort of have to get an intuition of, what is it? What is it we're talking about? What is the prime advantage versus a rate blitzing advantage and so forth. Okay, so let's get into some of the examples that we have. And this is not the first one. And so let's try to evaluate this do it from the both systems that we have. And so let's do the Olsen system. And so and do it systematically. One thing that Mark Olsen in his examples wasn't all that always consistent with is you should really go through all of these things, threats, racing, priming, blitzing, and that sort of thing. And he sort of assumes certain cases are obvious and that it's not, and it sort of skips over them. But so let's look at this one. First of all, do we have threats?
Yes, but.
But what?
But you have 8 checkers in the zone. I don't remember who said that about 8 versus 9, but that seems to be important in my hands. And you have the benefit of the good old 1-point acre, so you can't really get blitzed off the board.
Okay, well, we're looking at the perspective of white here, or yellow. So yes, so yeah, certain things on threats. First of all, black is on the bar. When your opponent's on the bar, you always have some level of threats because he might roll double sixes, or if nothing else, he might come in and be forced to make an awkward move with one of his other stacks. And in this case, he's got 3 big stacks of checkers.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So and the point of so there are some threats but the point is that you only have 8 checkers in the zone. So that diminishes the threats. It's in Michi's book, Opening Concepts, he had one of his proverbs was attacking with 10 checkers is strong, attacking with 8 checkers is weak. So we're attacking here with 8 checkers, and that's certainly a bit weaker than certainly weaker than 10 checkers. So we have threats because black is on the bar, but our threats are somewhat diminished because we only have 8 checkers in the zone. So that's it. So let's go on to the next part. Race. What is the race? Do we have an advantage in race?
Yes, we have a half.
Yeah. Well, yeah, half. We 8 pips. That's that's a lead. Mark, the Olsen system, basically you get 1 or half, and if you have a full advantage, you get 1. If you have half an advantage, you give 2. So I don't know if I made that clear or not. In his system, you start with you must have threats, but then you've got to get 2 out of these 3. The racing, priming, blitzing. So, but if you have half, you can count it as half, and then you can end up getting 2. out of it. So if you have half a race, half a blitz, but full prime, you get 2, and that would be enough. So race gives us half. And so that's fair. What about priming?
I would say yes.
Yeah, we certainly
Give it a
have a
half.
better start. And this is where it gets tricky, and I think you have to, I would think, go over a lot of examples to see what constitutes a full 1 for prime. Certainly black has nothing going on there. He's stacked with 2 points. We've got at least 3 points, so we have a certain advantage there. But what disadvantages do we have in our prime?
Well, you
We
can
don't
still
have
run a
landing.
prime from 3 to 8. I mean, that's
Right.
potentially possible.
Yeah. Well, the problem we have is that we don't have a lot of
Landing.
Would.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, we could get a thing, but not very soon. Because we got this big stack on the midpoint, and okay, if we make the 4 point, that's good, but then what about out here? We certainly have the advantage. Mark Olsen actually gives this a half for prime. So
Which
it's
is
half a race, half a prime.
Which
Go
is
ahead.
generous, I think. Although the point you made, Gary, that black is so stiff and that white has a 3-to-1 advantage in points. And I have my own system for strength, but that's beside the point. And that makes it more likely that black might enter awkwardly if black enters at all.
Yeah. Well, okay, and that goes to threats. Well, and the next section, blitzing. What's the blitzing value?
You'd rather have a midpoint checker on the 10-point.
Well, okay, but back to the Olsen system, though. We've established half a race. Mark gives us half for priming. And we've got to go to the next part, which is blitzing. What's our blitzing value compared to, again, it's our value compared to our opponents?
I'd say a half.
Say half, huh?
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
What's that?
Because you have only 8 checkers in the zone, and you only have 1 checker, which is a direct hit on the 1 point. So these are always, it's easy when confronted with a cube to say, oh my God, it's scary, because if it weren't scary, you wouldn't be offered a cube. But somebody also said, look, what good could happen in this position for black?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say all those are good points, but in terms of blitzing, you've got 3 points versus 1, and black's on the bar.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean,
so
from the standpoint of doubling, it's great.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing here. Is do we double here or not?
Well, in terms of double take versus double pass, I think the pass is harder than the double here. Yeah. I mean, the take is harder than the double.
So here we've got, this actually, we would consider this a 1 under the Olsen system for blitzing potential. And it's because you've got again, checker on the bar, 300 board points, versus nothing. That's I think part of it too, is it's not just in a vacuum. It's do we have to have this advantage compared to our opponents? So black has nothing in terms of blitzing potential. In fact, we've got the anchor, and we're not on the bar, and so we've got, so all that adds up to 1. So if you're going to use this system, you've got to understand, or practice enough to understand what the relative advantages are. So everything that Stu mentioned is correct, but when you're just comparing blitzing potential from one versus the other,
I see.
white has a tremendous advantage here. Now, again, the threats, I would call the threats are a little bit weaker in that and well, to a certain extent, blitzing is too, in that you're only going to have 8 checkers in the zone. So that's something to be taken account of somewhere.
Gary?
Yeah.
I think the big threat isn't so much what white can do on the next roll, but that black flunks on the next roll.
Yeah, that's a good point, which I didn't mention, but that's, that's regardless of what white does here. Black still got 25% chance of dancing again, just because of what's here already. And so that's a threat. That's why it's a much bigger threat level when your opponent is on the bar, when someone's on the bar versus having a lot of shots. Because even if you have a lot of shots, you still have to hit them to capitalize on the threat. Here, you don't have to do anything to capitalize on this threat because black's already on the bar. So, we're going to look at it. Well, we'll look at examples again where black isn't on the bar. We'll see what difference it makes.
Yeah. Gary, since this could end up either blitzing or priming, aren't you double counting by giving us a positive to both of those?
Well, yes, but that's part of the idea, I think.
Ah,
That's part of the strength. It's part of the flexibility of the position because from here you can blitz or prime, and that's part of the system. Maybe you're really strong. Like here, we're really strong in the blitz, but maybe he comes in with a 2-1 and gets to the 2-point, and then we have to switch to priming, which is why you look at both priming and blitzing. And why you're also looking at racing, because maybe he comes in and make the 4-point anchor, and then we can't really prime or blitz. And if that's the case, we'd really like to be ahead in the race. So I think part of his system there is to you may have, I've seen in some of the other examples we saw this where you may have a very strong advantage in one versus the other, but having an advantage, the advantage could be fleeting, and that you could you may have to switch to the other game plan, which is why race is always into it, because race is always always a game plan that you have to consider. Okay, I just want to take go back to the other crash system, the pressure system, which I'll put up here. And I don't want to go in too much in depth for it because we've already gone over it, and I just wanted to compare it. I happen to like it a little bit better. So I think it provides a different perspective. But again, we're looking at position rates, threats, and gamma potential. We're scoring these things from 0 to 3, something higher, and we're going to evaluate each position rates and threats on a scale of 0 to 1, and then add them up. And then if we get between between 2 and 3, it's a double and a take. If we get over 3, it's a double and a pass. Under 2, we don't double. So, and I don't know how many people actually use this to remember. So I'll just go through it. So, for position, so race, it's half. We take 16 as a target, so we get half for race. For position, we're going to look at our strength of our board versus our opponents, and we're going to assign values, bring the values back in for people to remember. But 5-point is 0.75 and 3-point is 0.3, and the values are here. The 4-point would be 0.5. So here we've got 1 versus nothing. So we got half a race, 1 for position, and threats. Again, black is on the bar with our inner board points, so that's a pretty high threat level. It may not be 1 because we only have 10 checkers in the zone, so maybe we go like 0.8 here or something like that. And again, the threats are the tricky ones to evaluate. Gamma potentials. Generally, we're going to go between 0 and 5. In this situation, it's black is on the bar, so there's some gamma potential. We have 300 points, all that. So I give it a 0.3 or something like that, more or less. And again, you have to practice this and look at it to really get it. But so we got half a race, 1 for board, let's call it 3/4 for threats, and 0.25 for gamma potential. That comes up to 2.5. So that would be a double and a take. For the Olsen system, we came up with, yes, we have threats. We have half for race, half for priming, and 1 for blitzing. So that's also a double. Is it a take under the Olsen system? Let me go back to the takes. You have to have an existing, essentially, you have to have 1. You've got to come up with 1 on the system. So if you're black, do you have 1 in terms of race, priming, blitzing, or contact?
Oh, no. Unless you make a point in your opponent's board.
Okay, well,
Then
that's contact. We don't have an anchor, so we don't get anything for the contact.
So we had only, in 2 instances, we only gave ourselves a half.
Yeah,
So that means that then the opponent then has a point.
that's correct. Yes, exactly. So yeah, so on the Olsen system, the point has, because again, race is only half and prime is only half. So that comes out to a point. So this would be a double and a take. So it's a double and a take, under both approaches. And so it is a double and a take. Okay.
Gary,
Yeah.
if you had an anchor, if black had an anchor in there or makes an anchor, then is it?
Well, let's look at that. So, and let's see how it changes the evaluation. Let's give black this point. And let's go back through it. Let's look at the Olsen system. Do we have race? Well, now we have 0 for race. Do we have threats? And the answer is not really. What are we going to do to scare black away? I mean, not really. So, and we don't have race. Do we have prime anymore? Not really. In fact, we don't have any. We have 2 points in front of black. Versus black's 2 points. So we don't have an advantage in priming here. Blitzing. Do we have any blitzing game plan here? Well, no. Black has the point, the anchor. So there's no blitz as long as black holds a point. So here, this is. So under the Olsen system, we basically have nothing. We don't even have a partial credit for anything. This is no double. In fact, we barely have an advantage at all. And if we looked at the pressure system, you see the same thing. Position, we still have the 5 point, which is something, but we don't have any threats. We don't have race. Very little gammon potential here. In fact, none really that you would count. And so, no double here. So now again, this was a double. Let's put the checker. Let's take him off the bar and put it here. And so how does this change our evaluation? Well, let's go through it. Do we have threats?
Yeah.
Yeah, we still have threats. We have the better board. We had an anchor to shoot at here, or I'm sorry, an anchor, a blot to shoot at here. So there are threats, but are they as good threats as when black was on the bar? Yeah, no, not even close. Because if we miss, that our threat went away. Whereas if regardless, in the other position, when black's on the bar, it doesn't matter what we do. We still have the threat because black is still on the bar. He has to come in. So, we have threats, yes, but they aren't nearly as strong. Now, I would guess a weakness of the Olsen system is you basically, he gives it 0 or 1 for threats. And it's harder to say, so you either have threats or you don't, but here's a case where we have some threats, but they aren't as strong. And so, it might be better off if he had tried to, assign a value to the threats, because there certainly are threats here, but the level of threats is far different from the other position. Okay, so we have,
Gary, I had a question. If you put
Sure.
the checker back on the black checker back on the bar, the fact that black's checkers on the 24 point, it's relatively safe there. Whereas if it were on the 21 or the 18, then, that's more of a drop. So how do you reconcile that with this point system? I don't
Yeah.
see that they're.
yeah, so no, that's a good point. It's, it's kind of it's a different version. So the question is, now, I would say that our priming didn't change and our race changed a little bit, but not very much. But what about our threats? Certainly our threats are greater now, I would think. Because now we can realistically hit loose to put a second checker on the bar. So our threats are better, and is our blitzing better? So I would say our blitzing is better here. But for the Olsen system, the prime is still the same. It's still a half. The race is actually a little bit worse. So, but still call it a half. The prime was 1 before, and it's still 1. The threats, were strong before, and now they're probably even stronger. So let's look at so basically from the Olsen system, you're in the same boat, I guess. It's a double and a take, I would think. Let's look at the pressure system, where, okay, you've got the race is a little bit weaker. Yes, so instead of half, it's maybe 0.4. The board is still the same, it's still a 1. Your threats have gone up a little bit. Instead of 7.5, maybe it's 8.5. And gamma potential has probably gone up too. Instead of maybe it's 0.2, it's maybe a 0.25, maybe it's 0.4, something like that. Adding that up, it still looks like it's a take, but should be a much closer take than that. So let's see. I don't know what it is, but it's still a take.
Big one.
And I forget so it's a 0.169. Now,
That's pretty big.
this was a 0.07 versus 0.1. So yeah, so it's a much stronger double here. It's a much closer take, but it's still a take. And so
Gary, what if you take the original position where black is on the bar and on 1, and then take 1 checker off the stack on the midpoint, move it to the 10, and what's the double take point on that one?
Okay. So so what have we done? We've now increased our threats. We've increased our priming value, and we've picked up a little bit in the race. So this is so we're obviously in a much stronger position, and we've improved our blitzing potential because of this extra checker. So here is it, but is this enough to push it over to a pass? Certainly closer. Well, let's look at the pressure system. Okay, we still have 1 for position. Race, we're now at 3/4. Threats, we've gone up a little bit. Maybe it's 0.9. Gamma potential has also gone up a little bit, 0.4. So this is probably a borderline take from that position. On the Olsen system, I can't really tell, but I would say this is a borderline take. I don't think it's bad if you pass this. Let's see. It is a pass. Yeah.
Am I correct, Gary, that if black has a point in home board, even say just a 3-point, that will make it not a double?
Well, let's put it on the 2-point. Since the 3-point.
No.
So here,
Black's home board, if black has 1 point in its home board, even a weak one, does that much weaken the
yeah.
likelihood?
Well, look, just look, what does it do to threats? I mean, you still have threats because we could, but now the blitzing potential goes
Sorry,
down.
no, my question, Gary, is if black has a home board point,
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. Okay.
does that very much weaken the case for doubling?
Yeah. Well, it for both systems. First of all, it depends on where it is. So here, and let's just focus on the Olsen system now. Now we've got, black still has the advantage of the blitz because black's on the bar and has no anchor, whereas white, it's the 8-point anchor. It's not the best, but it is an anchor of sort. So, white still has the advantage on the blitz. But what about the prime? So there's no advantage in the prime now for white because black has 3 points, white has 3 points. So this should drop it to a no double from the Olsen system. And on the pressure system, now it's the relative advantage of the boards that matters. White goes from a 1 for board to a 0.3 for board. So this is a no double intake, and it's a blunder to double here.
Suppose black had the 3-point instead of the 5-point, even that weakens it quite a bit.
Yeah, so 3-point here from the Olsen system, the blitz advantage is diminished a little bit. I would still say it's 1 just because black's on the bar and these points are obviously better. And the priming position, this is not a strong prime. This is the 3-point is kind of the borderline. You can't really prime with the 3-point, not very easily. But does white still have the advantage? Well, but it's still compared to the other, white only had half when black had 0. So does white have a half still on priming advantage? And I would say, not really. So that may drop it from a double. So black has strengthened his position. The question is it enough to drop it from a double take to a no double? Race, white's lead is less. I mean, it doesn't. We still have this one down here too. Back to so white's lead is less. In fact, there's hardly any lead at all. So that takes away half race. So from the Olsen system, this is a no double because you don't have a priming advantage. You don't have a half a priming. You have a little bit less for blitz, although not much. Threats are a little bit less. So this should be a no double. I think same for the pressure system. Instead of 1 for board, you've got 0.75. Instead of half for race, you've got basically 0. So this should be a no double. Yeah, but look how close it is. It is. We're up to a plus. We're up to 0.03. So it's just barely enough to push black or push it into a no double. If you double this, you wouldn't be far off. Okay, back to the original example. And these were all, this is just another variation. So here, what have we done? We really diminished the threats because black is now we have to hit black to carry through on the threat. So, and what's the intuition? Is this a double or a no double? Well, under the Olsen system, this is fairly easy. We have the same thing as before. Well, we have lessened threats. We have now 0 race instead of half. The prime is still the same. It's maybe half. Maybe not because we escaped the checker, from behind the prime. And blitzing, is certainly diminished because black's not on the bar. So, you know, this should be a no double. Same with the pressure system. There's no race, but the board is the same. Threats are weakened instead of, you know, 3/4 or maybe half. Gamma potential is also less. So, you know, this is a no double. Big no double. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So here, let's go through the Olsen system again. Do we have threats?
Yes.
Yes. What are they?
I can hit the fifth, you can conceivably,
Yeah. There's a blot out here. You could hit it. So that's something. What else do we have?
You have 5-3, makes a point.
Yeah, there's a blot here we could hit and point on, or just hit loose. Those are now, you know, when we say threats, these aren't necessarily market losing threats. But they're you know, so they're lesser threats, I would say. Yeah, I mean, if we hit this one, that's great, but black comes in anchors or something like that, that's, you know, that's not necessarily a market loser just on its own. Okay, so let's go through this. We have a lot of little threats, so let's call that, we have threats. What about race? Racing game plan.
it's even.
So it's even. So 0 for race. We don't have a racing game plan here. We don't have the advantage in the racing game plan. What about prime?
You've got prime potential.
Yeah. Well, again, the Olsen system, are we better than our opponent? And
Yeah.
is significant. So we're certainly better. But is it significant? We have 3 points to a prime, and they're good points versus 2. So again, here's a situation where you got to kind of practice the Olsen system and try to just help distinguish between what's, you know, is this full value for a prime or is this better? Now we also have, unlike the prior situation, we have more checkers in the zone we could conceivably fill in the bar point or the 5 point to improve the prime, but we haven't done it yet. So there's a lot, you know, there's a fair bit there.
And the opponent is split, so he could make an anchor, which would really diminish our,
Well, yeah,
our blitzing.
That's true, but just focusing on the prime, do we have 0, a half, or 1?
Half.
Yeah, I would say a half. I wouldn't say, Mark also said it was a half. So I would take his word for it. It's his system. What about blitzing potential?
Some.
Bitching blitz. Yeah, we've got some, you know, again, this point, we could point on this point. Black has, you know, no board. We've got checkers in the zone, so it's a little. Is it enough?
Roll D5.
Is it enough for half or 1 for the Olsen system?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, and now I might give it half. I would have probably given it half. Mark Olsen calls it a 0 for this. He doesn't think this is enough to blitz. And so given that, you know, weak threats, but weak threats, half for 0 for race, half for priming, and even, I guess, even if you gave it half, I guess it's a situation where you, since on threats you get 0 or 1, we really should have to, this is not really a full one for threats, so maybe it's a weak threats. Weak threats, weak blitz, certainly we have the advantage, but, it's not enough for a double. So now if we went through the pressure system, we would look at, 0 for race, half for board, threats, same situation, half for threats, 0.2 for gamma potential. And we're at 0, half, and half. We're at 1, gamma 1.2, 1.3. Again, below the 2 threshold, no double here. Just not quite enough yet here. Now we could play the game a little bit, put this checker on the bar. And what does that do? Well, that certainly enhances our threats. Picks up a little bit on the race, enhances the blitzing potential. This, I would say, is probably a double, but still a take. Yeah, it's barely a double here. Again, with a pressure system too, we still have half for board. Now we've got almost half for race, but the threats, we go from half at best to maybe 3/4. Gammons go up. All that leads to just enough to double. Okay, let's look at another one. So here, what do we have?
We have 1 for threats.
We certainly have threats here. 2 back checkers in the bar, that's usually a good threat. Even with no points.
And 1 for race.
Certainly have 1 for race, we're up 17 pips. So that's the racing game plan. What about the priming game plan?
0.
Probably 0, yeah. I mean, you can't really prime when you have the ace point. Blitzing game plan.
Mm.
Again, it's weaker because you have currently 8 in the zone.
Yeah, the weakness here is that our 8 in the zone. What's the strength of it though?
He has the 0-point anchor.
That's right. 2 on the bar.
2 on the bar.
Better by far. You got to give this a full 1.
Yeah.
Potential because black has nothing, no points. Black has and had 2 on the bar. So this is going to be
1 for blitz.
Yeah, 1 for blitzing.
Okay.
And again, it's not well. So this is going to be a so this is going to be a double. Is this a take?
No.
Yeah, and now going through all the criteria, why is it not a take?
Because we have 3.
Well, we didn't have blitz. I'm sorry, we don't have prime.
Oh.
But does black have an advantage in anything? Let's go through. Does black have an advantage? Well, threats are in any of the game plans. Does that black have a racing advantage? Well, no, obviously not. Does black have a priming advantage? Well, we can't give white an advantage for prime, but certainly black has no priming advantage here. You got nothing. So no priming advantage. A blitzing advantage for black. None. Contact advantage. And well, black has 2 in the bar. You need an anchor to have the advantage. So black's got 0 here. So black's got nothing here.
But if black does get an anchor, the game will slowly turn round. So I'm surprised you give nothing for contact.
Well, you have to have it now. That's a key feat. You have to have it now. Just because you might get it. I mean, you could have just an open 5-point and a 5-point board, and you might get the anchor if you roll double 5s. But that's not enough. You have to have it in hand for it to count for this system. So here, this would be a double and a pass under the Olsen system. Let's look under the pressure system. A lot of things are the same. You got 1 for race. Position is not that great. It's 0.3, 0.1. So that's 0.4. So you're weak there. So that's position and race. Threats are certainly one. As before, and then the additional part for the pressure system is gamma potential. And here's one of the tricks in the pressure system that you need to become accustomed to is normally we'll limit it to 0 to 0.5. And if you limited it to 0.5, you would come up with a take here. But in this case, the gammas are so high that you need to kind of, extend it beyond the 0.5. So again, that's sort of a trick of the pressure system that, again, these are conceptual frameworks. They don't always, you kind of stretch them out to make it fit. So this is a double and a big pass. And again, if we look at the, the gammons here, 40% gammons, generally, gammon range for the pressure system is 0.2 is 20% is a 0.2 and 30% is a 0.5. So here we're way above that. And again, you have to sort of practice it to get a feel for what the gammon potentials are here. Okay. All right, so we're now past time. So that's enough for today. And we'll go on to the charrette.